I don't know if you guys agree with me on this, but Notre Dame also seems to always get off to quick starts in games, even in games that they lose for whatever reason. Like I can't tell you how many times Brian Kelly takes the ball and all of a sudden they're up 7-0, and then things kind of slow down, which is kind of weird. It's because everything's scripted, different things like that. But what are your guys' thoughts kind of on what I just mentioned there?
I just think the notion that I've seen, and this is kind of in conjunction with what I was trying to say and what you were saying, that the notion that Notre Dame needs to just absolutely, roll like a train over Louisville to have any chance of beating Georgia is just stupid. Because I don't know. Because people will say, well, we need to get up by a lot so we get some of these younger guys in and get them experience. I want them getting experience when the game matters. I want them getting experience, first drive, first quarter, end of the first quarter, somewhere in that ballpark. And some of these guys that need experience, they're going to make mistakes. And so, I don't know. I guess I just get bothered by the people that, and Nathan, you kind of referenced it, that freak out over that type of thing. And then, if we're sitting here on, Tuesday talking about the fact that Notre Dame only beat Louisville by 17 or something like that. And it's like, oh gosh, Louisville is terrible and we only beat them by 17. We've got no chance for the rest of the season. We might as well just send it in now. That's the mentality, I guess, that kind of bothers me, because, would you rather Braden Lenzy be playing against, Braden Lenzy probably gets a better look in practice than he would playing against Louisville's third string defense in the third quarter of a game that Notre Dame's up by 40, if that makes sense. So I think it's just kind of weird that people always we need to get these guys in a blowout game to get them experience. I just don't feel like it works that way. So I don't know. Either way, there's going to be the overreaction train, and I'm trying to sort of change the narrative a little bit to not overreact to what happens against Louisville and New Mexico, because, like Nathan said, there are human elements that go into those games, first game of the year, jitters, night game, that type of thing. The fact that they're playing Louisville and they're favored by 20-some points is going to, come into it. You'd like to think that, you treat every opponent the same, but it just doesn't happen that way. So, I don't know.
And before I turn over for Mason for his comments, it's not like you're talking about Phil Jurkovec playing over Ian Book to get some reps. You want your main guys playing, but right now our main guys could be guys like Lawrence Keys and Braden Lenzy until Michael Young and Cole Kmet and guys like that come back.
Right, yeah, and probably the obvious exceptions to those types of things, you're not going to change the quarterback out, like you said. You're not really going to do a lot of changing on the offensive line, right? But some of the backs and receivers, and then defense is kind of a little bit of a different animal. You can get, Howard Cross, for instance, into the game pretty early, I think, if you want to. So that's kind of a little bit different, but obviously, yeah, like you said, I'm not trying to advocate, well, let's send Ian Book out there for a drive and then let's go to Phil. That's not really what I'm going for, but yeah, that was a good clarification by you. Thanks.
Mason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what Ben was saying about getting young guys experience, and I think that whether Brian Kelly and Chip Long want to or not, it's going to happen because of Michael Young's injury. It's looking like Lawrence Keys is going to have to start, or whether it's Wilkins, it could be Wilkins too. It gets a significant amount of playing time, but moving Fink to the outside and then having one of them run through the slot, it looks like, based on the way they've been lining up in practice, that could be the way that they line up against Louisville, and that could be a lot of valuable time. We could be shocked by what we see with Keys and Wilkins, and maybe they could stay there. Ideally, you like Fink in the slot with Young outside, but if Young has some growing pains getting back into a place where he's 100%, maybe we see guys like Lenzy too that make an impact and kind of stay, and you'd like to see that because outside of, you have Claypool, Fink, and Young, who I still think is a little bit unproven. He's supposed to have a breakout season. You have a lot of question marks at your wide receivers. So, yeah, it'd be nice to see some guys prove themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and kind of going off what you just said, I think it has been announced that Fink's pretty much going to play on the outside until Young comes back with at least Keys playing a key role in the slot. But I also think, we're going to see Tommy Tremble as a backup tight end to Brock Wright, and I think Brock Wright's had a really good off season so far, kind of reinventing himself and changing his body a little bit. I think we're going to see some 2-back sets because they trust Jafar Armstrong and Tony Jones to be pass catchers out of the backfield, so you might even see those guys in the slot a little bit. And then, I mean, I think it's fair to say that Chris Fink and Chase Claypool are going to be, they're going to be leaned upon, but they also should be. One's a fifth-year senior, one's a fourth-year senior. They both have a lot of playing time under their belt, and we should expect them to have, even though they've already been, good players for Notre Dame in the past, we should expect those guys to, elevate their play to another level this year, especially if we want to get back to the college football playoff. But kind of switching gears a little bit here, and we'll start with Mason on this one. I feel like we haven't talked to you as much here the past few minutes. But what is your biggest question mark about this team? And then afterwards, if you want, throw out what do you think the biggest strength is of this team? Like, what would really surprise you at that position, or a certain type of play was poor for them outside of an injury occurring?
Well, I think the linebacker position would be too easy. So let's see. I'd say the other corner outside of Troy Pride, you've heard a lot about Dante Vaughn stepping into that position, but until I see it and I see him play live and play well, I'm still going to question it. I guess the entire secondary outside of Pride, Gilman, and Elliott, I don't know what's going to happen with Houston Griffith. How much playing time is Kyle Hamilton going to get? I feel like that's question marks. I mean, outside of the linebackers, everybody knows that's going to be a question mark throughout the season. And then the biggest strength, I would say, the quarterback play. If Book plays as well as he did last season, I think that's going to be key. You need a game manager like Book. He's not the kind of guy like Trevor Lawrence who's going to win the game by himself, just because he's a step above, a level above everybody else on the field. But Book's a game manager, and he can go out there and give your team a chance to win with his completion percentage and how he spreads the ball around. So I think if he plays like he did last season, maybe even better, he went to the Manning Passing Academy this offseason, and I think he's improved his game a lot. I saw it live, and as long as he's cool and composed and plays as well as he did, I think that's a big strength for him and the team.
For me, I think
Go ahead, Ben.
Kind of the biggest question mark, and I was actually kind of going to go the same way that Mason went. I'll put a little bit of a different spin on it. Obviously, linebacker is a big question, like Mason kind of mentioned, but I actually feel pretty decent about the linebacker position. I mean, Asmar Bilal's racked up a lot of playing time. All glowing things about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And then whoever plays alongside those two, I think is going to be okay. I just think that's going to happen. I think that, when they get live competition against another team, it'll be a situation where we see some guys really step up. But in general, I think the biggest question mark for me is, can this defense stay healthy? Because I think that if this defense should be pretty decent, I think they're going to be pretty decent, but they're not going to be decent if they're dealing with injuries. Dante Vaughn, I mean, one of the bright spots of, the 4-8 year in 2016 was Dante Vaughn as a true freshman, especially coming on at the end of the year. And then last year you saw him drop off. He was injured. A lot has been made about his poor performance against Clemson. So, there's him, and then there's Sean Crawford, who might be even the starter at the other cornerback position beside Troy Pride, on the opposite side of Troy Pride, I guess I should say. But yeah, that other cornerback position is, obviously we know about Sean Crawford's injury history. So can they stay healthy is really kind of more of what I'm worried about, I suppose. And I'm going to end up saying a lot of the same things as Mason here. I mean, the biggest strength I think is going to be the passing game, because I just think that for the first time under Brian Kelly, a quarterback is coming in, and there's no doubt that Ian Book is the starter. I mean, if you trace back all of the quarterbacks under Brian Kelly, there was very rarely was the same guy starting, from the end of one year to the next, and even more rarely was he starting, and there was no question mark about whether he should be starting or not. That's not the case for Ian Book. So I think this is the time where we're going to see a Notre Dame quarterback take a leap. And I think it's going to be really good. And part of the reason why I'm so high on this Notre Dame team is because I think you're going to get, Jimmy Clausen level type of quarterback play. And, some of those Notre Dame.
Praise.
Yeah. And I feel pretty strongly about that, to be honest with you. And can you imagine if a Jimmy Clausen led team had any type of a decent defense? how good Notre Dame would have been back, I guess Clawson was at the end of the 2000s. Those Notre Dame teams would have been pretty good with a decent defense, and I think they've got a pretty decent defense that has the opportunity to be better than decent, I suppose.
Funny you mentioned Clawson, because I think I was reading something the other day about how they would. I forgot who it was. It was one of the bigger Notre Dame guys that was talking about it, like Tim Prister or something like that. And whoever it was, mentioned that it'd be awesome to see Clawson on a team like this, or even with Brian Kelly, because kind of like what you were saying, they've had the defenses under Kelly outside of a couple of those Brian Van Gorder years, and he was just so dominant that junior year that Clawson would just be really fun to watch in an offense like this. But I'm actually going to take a little bit of a different route than both of you guys, and partly because, a little different twist. And, we all know about the linebackers and the backup corners and maybe even the depth at certain spots on defense. And maybe it's because we've been so accustomed to this specific position group being dominant at Notre Dame. But I'm not 100% convinced that the offensive line is going to be really good. And I think that people are just we recruit there well, we're going to be fine. Whatever they say, these guys were 5 stars, they're seniors or they're in their second year playing with them, blah, blah, blah. Until I see dominant performances from Tommy Kramer, Liam Eichenberg, and mostly those two, I think. I mean, obviously Jared Patterson's unproven, so you probably got to throw him in there too. They weren't a dominant group last year, and I think that they finished top 5 in that offensive line award, mostly off reputation. So if they can't, I think we all expect that the offense is going to be just way better than last year, and maybe even sort of a role reversal, where the offense is really good, the defense is just good enough to make sure they're a dominant football team. But I'm somewhat worried that the offensive line can hold this offensive back from being completely dominant. I don't know what your guys' thoughts on that are. I
actually agree with that quite a bit. I don't know, Tommy Kramer to me was maybe the weak spot of Notre Dame's offensive line last year. And, I guess I kind of chalk up the fact that I'm not real worried about it right now to the fact that from what I've heard about Tommy Kramer, I think Tommy Kramer was a pretty good tackle, to be honest with you. But when they moved him inside and started pulling him, he just didn't have the agility and to get out in front of a ball carrier and pull and hit guys. And that, I think that was a big thing with Notre Dame's running game a little bit. So I don't know. I think he's improved on those types of things. I don't get to see him, but from whatever, everything I've heard, he's more agile. He's kind of, I don't know. When you were talking about Brock Wright earlier, you talked about recreating himself a little bit. I feel like that's kind of what Kramer has done from what I've heard. But yeah, until I see it, I won't really know. So that's probably next on my list of anxieties. I still think though, even if the running game isn't great, I think the passing game can be pretty darn good. And I know that there are concerns at receiver and things. I think Notre Dame's reaching closer to a point of plug and play at receiver than they have in recent years. But if they're able to stretch the field with the receivers a little bit, I think that the running game can be better without the offensive line really taking much of a step forward, because now if you can stretch the field, the safeties have to play back a little more. We know how it goes. So I would say that that's probably my second, I suppose, highest anxiety is the offensive line.
Do you have anything to say about the offensive line, Mason?
Nothing more to add, really. I am worried about it, but not nearly as much as other positions. I think we recruited well enough, and that Jeff Quinn will do a good enough job to make sure he's got a solid 5 out there. And I have plenty of trust in the backups as well. But yeah, like you guys said, it's gonna be something we need to see. And this isn't gonna be a line like with McGlinchey and Nelson. It's not gonna be that. We don't have those kind of guys yet. We have this kind of guys waiting in the wings. Patterson, Banks. Guys like those could be those first-round kind of guys, but it's not quite yet. I think the offensive line will be a definite strength next season, a big-time strength, one of the biggest on the team, but it's not quite there yet.
Oh, yeah, no, I think that's fair. If you recruit the position well, I mean, maybe it won't be a dominant offensive line, but at the very least, it'll be solid. And I think most people would agree with that. And kind of going off of that, and then we'll move on to something completely different here in a few minutes. But I kind of feel that way about the